Good morning. I'm from Exane. I have a first question, if you don't mind, on your guidance for 2018. You indicated net sales that would be flat, 9 Falcons less to be delivered. What will offset the missing revenues, apart from the 3 Rafales delivered to France? I mean, I imagine that there would be some part of it that would be the F3R standard, but what about Falcon support or Rafale exports? Well, the first topic, says Mr. Trappier, is the delivery of the F3Rs. It's at the time of the delivery that you get in your revenues, really. So when the revenues come in, it's quite a lot in this case for F3R in 2018, that's the first reason. That's when the revenues are encashed. Now, secondly, is the mixes aren't always the same between the deliveries in one year and the deliveries in another year. So it's mainly those two reasons that account for our forecasts of flat sales. Okay, thank you. Well, then the second question I have is the R&D going down this year. I'd like a trend, please, for 2018 regarding where you're headed in terms of R&D spend. And in general, what would be the R&D package for the next peak period in the coming decade, let's say, when you have a big volume of development with 6X and fairly advanced in the future Falcon? What will be the R&D spending then? Mr. Trappier, well, I'm going to frustrate people with my answers, but we don't give guidance on R&D. But I would correct you, the R&D for 2017 went up compared with R&D in 2016, not proportionally to our sales, but in absolute figures, it was more than €3 million worth. It was less than that the previous year in 2016. So what I said in my presentation regarding that was important to bear in mind. The absolute value is one thing, but the sales are something else. But the absolute value will go up for R&D because we'll have the 6X that will be rolled out, and we want it to go as quickly as possible. So we'll have to allocate the resources there too. Also, we'll be pursuing at the same time the development or the launch of the future Falcon. So obviously, it's going to involve R&D spending. It's got to go up. But I won't tell you the proportions. You'll find that out when it happens, I suppose, next year when we report on 2018 at this time of the year. Somebody with a question. Yes, I've a question on Malaysia that said this morning that the decision of the European Union to drop its imports of palm oil could have an impact on the calls for tender for future combat planes. I mean, are negotiations continuing? Have you seen any reactions on the side of Malaysia regarding that? And the Emirates, you talked about the Emirates. There were talks still going on, I think, on the Rafale. And could you tell us about that? And then the options. Are there talks going on at the moment with Egypt regarding further Rafales? On Malaysia, says Mr. Trappier. Well, you know, we're in the run-up to elections in Malaysia. Palm oil is a major issue for that country. You know, it's got nothing to do with us directly, but politically it could impact the relations among several countries. The fact is, palm oil is the focus of lots of debates between the European authorities, French authorities, Malaysian authorities, and other countries in the region. You know, it's a topic that gets talked about. But we're in life to propose the best possible combat aircraft to the Malaysian Air Force, and we have started talks to them some time ago. They've evaluated our aircraft. Talks should pick up in that area again, depending on when the new government takes office. So I can't really tell you any more about that at this point in time. On the United Arab Emirates, the answer is yes, we're talking to the Emirates, but on the Mirage 2000-9. So we make fairly sound aircraft. They last a long time. As you've seen, the French are going to keep their Mirage 2000 for a long time and also upgrade with the 2000Ds. So the thing is, our aircraft are sound, but our clients, therefore, are very satisfied with our aircraft, with our Mirage aircraft. That is, they last a long time. They're efficient in their operations. They're capable of being upgraded. We've seen that in the Emirates. The first time with the 2000-9, we've seen it in Greece with the Emirates and France. You know, so it's something you can scale, this aircraft. So that gives us confidence in our partnerships with these armed forces that use the Mirage 2000s. And we think that the users of Mirage 2000s, starting off with Egypt, Qatar, and India, it'll all continue along the same path in the future. Now, the third subject, that's the options. Okay. Well, we hope to exercise to see the exercising options. One has been exercised already. That's the Qatar one, and there are other options elsewhere in India. We hope, that these aren't options, but we hope to pursue with our success with the first 36. The Indian Air Force has greater needs than what's already been ordered. So we hope to continue selling Rafales to countries that we've already sold Rafales to, and there are new options then for Qatar as well. Guillaume Le Compagnie for AIN. You sold 38 Falcons, therefore, in 2017 net. Now, what's your objective in terms of order intake for Falcons in 2018? Is it something similar to have a book-to-bill ratio that would be about 40 for 40 delivered, or what? Mr. Trappier. Well, the thing to do with deliveries, well, it's all hinges on the orders. So it's not, you can't say it's 40-40. So no, I won't give you the guidance that we have internally, because it's not easy to come up with anyway. So we've no guidance on the sales of Falcons. We try to deliver 40. The 40 will be delivering potentially. We're trying to do that for 2018. Are nearly all made already, because we have an order book of 52 aircraft. Some are 5Xs that will be transformed into 6Xs. Converted, so that's been planned in advance. So, your mathematical calculation, isn't totally true. But anyway, we want to sell aircraft. We have a full range. We're selling aircraft. Some of today's sales might be delivered in 2018, but very often they're delivered later on, in the next year, and so on. Because, orders come in and then deliveries are made sometime later. 52 ordered. If we deliver 40, we have a bit more than a year's worth in the backlog. Thierry Bigre, I'm from Le Point. It seems that there is some reluctance by Egypt regarding the Rafale because of the Scalp missiles. What about the American component? Could that be developed by the European industry, do you think, in reasonable lead times? Well, I won't make any comments on this topic. This is a sensitive issue. It's not in my hands, because you're talking about the Scalp missiles. This is a separate contract entered into by MBDA. And also, these are very touchy issues. They're being talked about from one state to another between the client and between the supplier and client states. And if there are authorizations to be requested as little as possible, it's all done at state level, between the state that supplies the component and the state that supplies the airplane, in France in this case. So I've got no particular comments to make on this topic. If you think of Egypt, we've started the deliveries of the airplane, so there's confidence there, there's trust that's been set up between Egypt and ourselves that will deliver the Rafales with their weapons.
Oui, bonjour, Philippe Bonnet pour les...
Philippe Bonnet, ECHO, Belgium. I'd like to know, what is your schedule for the Belgians in case we sign for the Rafale market, for the deliveries, I mean? Well, it all depends on the T0, and the T0 is whether we sign the contract or not. So when will Belgium like to sign a contract with us? That's a question we need to ask the Belgian authorities. Well, right from tomorrow morning, so long as we get a pen, a few legal clauses, we could sign very quickly. It is France, in terms of government, that is making a state offer to the other states. So we will lend the pen to France, but I think it'll be done fast. And the problems of deliveries, it will take 3 years from T0, that is from the time of the signature and the first payment. Thank you. Jean-Dominique Berchet, what is the production rate today in the Rafale and Falcon factories? So the Falcon, that's quite easy. We've delivered 49. So 49 divided by 11, that will give you an order of magnitude. It's not exactly that, because there could be some delays. You could do 40 divided by 11. That will give you the rate. I'll let you calculate. It will give you a bracket. As for the Rafale, just as for the Falcons, the question of this production rate is very complex. Why? Because if you say that the delivery rate, these are the orders we have, the delivery of orders, and we will reach 2.5 in the coming years, a little more, actually. And then there is the production rate in each and every factory. So at Sequin, they have already increased their production rate. Today, we are increasing the production rate in our assembly plants, Biarritz, Martignas, and it is Mérignac that will increase its rate at the end, because that's the final assembly. So the production rate is a whole organization that will allow us to deliver, as for the Rafales, at the date when we have promised to deliver these aircraft, while smoothing out the work carried out in the production plants. So we were at rate 1. That was in France, 11 aircraft per year. We're going to deliver slightly more, 2.5 aircraft per month in the coming years. So there is a development of the ramping up of Rafale and from our subcontractors. I'd like to repeat, because some people have questions on this. For me, it is easier to increase the production rate than to go down. I prefer having more work than less work. But it gives headaches to people who have to manufacture the aircraft, but they're paid for that.
Bonjour, Vincent Lamijon, Challenge.
Yes, hello, I'm from Challenge magazine. We have the impression that you're a bit disappointed regarding the future combat aircraft project between the French and the British, and the fact of moving on from cooperation with the British to cooperation with the Germans. Have you full confidence in their capabilities and what you're going to develop with the Germans, the combat aircraft? Would it be less good than what you would develop with the British? Well, these are two separate topics, actually, so there's no issue there. If you perceive disappointment, it's on the Franco-British one, not because of our British friends or anything. They mobilized their efforts along with ourselves on all of this. I'm talking about the British industrialists, the BA Systems and people like that, because the disappointment is because, you know, you do design work for 5 or 6 years. We've been doing design work, and we wished to obtain a contract so as to build a demonstrator. But it didn't happen. So obviously there was a certain disappointment because of that. The second thing is we're talking about combat drones in particular. You know, the British have committed to the acquisition of F-35s. So for the moment, up to now, under the Lancaster House Agreement and the work we've been doing with them, we haven't talked about a future combat aircraft. We've talked about a combat drone, the demonstrator, an additional one, additional to the combat aircraft. Now, regarding the Franco-German efforts, it's quite different. It's an approach seen from the top, you know, political and technical level, really. Political between two heads of state, and secondly, this happened with the British too, of course, but technically speaking too, because by 2040, the idea is what will make up an air force, you know, detection of airborne warfare, you know, surveillance, mail drones, surveillance aircraft. What will be the combat aircraft? What will be the weapons used then? For what type of mission or operation? 2040, because we're only in 2018 right now. So it's a more holistic approach, an overarching approach. We've started the work on that, and there's no transfer from Franco-British efforts to Franco-German efforts. No, there's two totally different processes. One is the Franco-British one that's kind of, you know, marking time at the moment due to certain consequences of Brexit, which, of course, is keeping the British political authorities busy, and that's understandable. It's very complex to address, and it's going to be rather heavy duty for the British in the coming few years. And then the Franco-German efforts are something different with a view to 2040. It's a totally different time frame, so we haven't yet defined if we're going to make demonstrators or prototypes or what. We'll probably make them, but, you know, we don't know yet. So quite openly, I'm very enthusiastic about defining a new air combat system, a new aircraft. We have the skills to do it, and our design office is really happy that there'll be a future combat aircraft in parallel being able to upgrade the Rafale the whole time and make surveillance drones and maybe even combat drones with the British at the same time. Our design office will be very busy. So we're quite enthusiastic, and so am I, of course, very enthusiastic about all of this, about preparing the future on the Franco-German basis. And you know, it's good for the French and good for the Germans, and we're very enthusiastic.
Bonjour, Olivier.
Good morning, Olivier Brochet, Credit Suisse. I have 3 questions. So the first is on business jets. You said that the United States were good for you at the end of 2017. In general, for the entire market per geographical zone, what will be the future outlooks? The second question, on one of the slides, you were talking of a cooperation agreement with Qatar in the framework of this 36 aircraft option. Can you tell us what does this cooperation agreement mean exactly? And as for the Forex in 2018 and beyond and the hedging of the Forex, can you tell us about the future of this hedging? So the first topic, as I said, the United States. You know that in the United States, a large part of our basis is Falcon aircraft. The renewal of the ranges in the United States was postponed because of the crisis that has been going on for years now, and by the uncertainties generated in the United States because of the elections or because they were expecting some taxation measures. Apparently, there is a kind of stabilization right now of the American economy. It is progressing. The American tax measures have been announced. They have been understood, anticipated by the American companies, and so now we feel that there is a kind of upturn in the United States. So the whole range, the 8X that we've started selling in the United States, the 2000 range or the 900 range, which is an aircraft that is really liked in the U.S., the arrival of the 6X, that can be a very good option for our American friends. The United States is still a priority market for Dassault, therefore. Europe, this is our home. Northern Europe is a geographical area that is well occupied, apart from the traditional Falcon 2000 range for those who travel a lot in Europe, ATEX, those who go to Asia. All this will be strengthened with the new 6X offer. If you leave from Paris, you can cover a lot of destinations throughout the world with the 6X. So we hope that we can strengthen our sales capacity by launching the 6X and improve our creditworthiness with Pratt & Whitney. As for the rest of the world, Asia remains a priority. As I tell you each and every year, it's slow, it's taking a lot of time, but we're patient. We have managed to sell our Rafales, so we have a good range, good Falcon aircraft, and we are selling little by little. In China, we've sold ATEX. We're going to deliver them, the ATEX, because China is far away from many countries, and so therefore that is probably the aircraft we will sell most, as we sold a lot of 7Xs in China. But not only China, the rest of Asia is also buying Falcon aircraft. There are new economies developing in Asia, and we really believe in the Asian zone. I'm skipping Japan. Japan, we've sold a few maritime surveillance aircraft, but we hope to sell more governmental aircraft in maritime surveillance and electronic war in the future. Africa is doing better. We see it happening. They were really affected by the drop in oil prices. Now they're doing better, and I think they should also buy more. So we should sell more in Africa. And in Europe, I've included Russia in Europe. It is geographical, not the EU, and we are selling a lot of Falcons to our Russian partners. So it is really a global geographical policy. Each zone has its specificities and preferences. I have no figures to give you particularly on all this. As for the second question, the cooperation agreement, well, we've agreed automatically on deliveries and prices according to the options exercised for the 36 aircraft. So they can give us an option of 12 per 12 or 24, sorry. So we have mechanisms to allow us to exercise these options. So for them, it's easier. They don't have to go through the entire financial circuit. They've also set up and booked the provisions, so it is easier for them to buy in the future. And thirdly, the exchange, the hedging. So we have fixed it at 1.21. And just as everybody else, we're following the dollar. But I think the dollar is going down quite strongly, so we'll have to hedge our currencies. That's the life of our company. There are some underlying capital gains, and we will keep hedging. Our financial manager is here, and he's attentive. It's not good news in general, the drop of the dollar. It's good news for our American friends, but not for us.
Monsieur Tran.
Mr. Tran, you have a question. Aviation Week. No, that's not me, he says. Pierre Tran's my name, but it's not the right journal. Anyway, Defence News, yes, that's it, Defence News. The other one, the other weekly, that's the one I'm from. Thank you. So, you hope to enter into a contract, for 3 Falcons under the CUGE arrangement. 3 Falcons. I thought you said Rafale, says Mr. Trappier. No, I said Falcons, says the speaker. So now the 3 Falcons, mission Falcons, with the CUGE capability, well, it would be long-range ones. 8X maybe were still being talked about, is the answer. And the total value, total contract value, we don't know. I can't tell you because I know the price of 3 airplanes. But having said that, you've got to put in the Thales equipment. And Thales knows its price, and then you've got the integration work to be done. These would be contracts for Thales and for ourselves. So at this stage, until the contract is signed, we don't really know. We can't put a figure on it. I don't know. And even when it's signed, I won't tell you either. It would be up to the DGA to tell you that. OK, thank you. And what about Switzerland, says Mr. Tran? Is there any interest being manifested by Switzerland for the Rafale? Because they seem to be interested in combat aircraft. Switzerland. OK, Switzerland. Well, you know the fact of the F-5s having to be replaced by Rafales, which were really ahead of those aircraft in terms of operational capabilities. And the choice was on the grip end, because a small aircraft was supposed to replace a small aircraft. It's a bit cheaper for the Swiss to buy those ones instead, even though we gave them all the arguments to tell them that you wouldn't compare, apples with apples here, was apples and pears between the grip end and the Rafales. So the referendum in Switzerland impeded that purchase. I think the Swiss are always very reasonable when they do their referenda, not just for airplanes, but for anything else. So now there is a request for a replacement of the F-18s as well. Now, I think the Rafale that was really relevant to replace the F-5, it'll be even more relevant to replace the F-5 and the F-18, because I don't think the Swiss wish to drop their capabilities in terms of their armed forces aircraft. So I think the Rafale could replace very well the F-18. It's a small aircraft that can do the missions. Gripen is small, but it doesn't do the missions the same way, at least to a lesser extent. And the Typhoon is much bigger than the Rafale. And the F-35 is, well, I don't know how, would take off and so on. You need to, do an awful lot of maneuvering in the middle of the Swiss mountains. So I think the Rafale should be well positioned there. The Swiss will be sending out a call for tender. They'll be opening it up, and we're waiting that call for tender to come out shortly. In the coming number of years, a program has been announced by Switzerland. We'll see what happens with their request for proposals and any timeline on that. No, well, it's up to the Swiss to decide when they issue their call for tenders. We're biding our time. We're waiting for it to come out. We have our office in Switzerland, and we are in touch with our industrial partners in Switzerland. And, we'll be mobilized and motivated when the Swiss call for tender comes out. And what about Belgium, says Mr. Tran? What about the legal advice on that? Well, I'm not awaiting any legal advice. I know what's in the call for tender. We didn't answer it because France decided to engage in a wider partnership. But in the call for tender, it said in any case at the outset, there was no commitment by anybody in responding to that call for tender. At least that was for the Belgian authorities. So I don't want to get involved in what legal counsel might think. But, I think what I think. I think a government in a sovereign country can do what it likes. It can stop a call for tender when it likes. It can purchase without making a call for tender. It's quite free to do that. Can buy off the shelf. But it's a question of the way it communicates and its political choices. That's its business, really. I mean, states make their choices, It comes out in the newspapers. They're quite entitled to make political choices. Look at India. Look at the process that's been followed. It's not quite the same. But anyway, our adventures in Korea, it's not necessarily the winner that won. Look at the Netherlands. They called for tender. It was sent to Dassault after the choice was made of the F-35, just to justify the choice that was already made. So, I mean, these things happen. So you could list out quite a lot of situations like that, choices made with respect to calls for tender. Okay, thank you.
Question encore?
Are there any more questions? Thierry Dubois, Aviation Week. A question on the electronic warfare Falcons. Will these be service aircraft or new aircraft? Yes, there'll be new aircraft. So long as the contract is not signed, we'll see, but we'll adapt ourselves accordingly. Mr. Chairman, we really appreciated what you said at the French Parliament, at the Assemblée Nationale, but weren't you too nice vis-à-vis cooperation, especially in the field of military aircraft? Because as far as we know, and according to our experience, this has given way to failing hybrid aircraft. You didn't stick to the deadlines. The costs, we thought they would be lower, but they were actually higher. And there were problems with exports. And finally, if you look at the Eurofighter, partners have left and they were angry with each other. So in order to have Franco-German reconciliation, I think we could have done better than to have a Franco-German aircraft. Well, I'm not always a good person, but good if I am. And there's a difference between the corporations you're mentioning and the ones where we could be in. Because if we are in that cooperation and if we are the leaders, these cooperations could be successful. I'm saying could because it would all depend on what the states impose on us and how they organize themselves. Well, I'm going to give you an example, the example of the Neuron. We were 6 countries. We were 6 industries for 400 million euros. We had a flying object. It was flying well. It was very stealthy. There aren't many in the world that can do that. And we did it right on time and within the budget. So when we are the leaders, and we weren't the leaders for the drone Neuron because Dassault has a lot of influence everywhere, but we were the legitimate ones. We were legitimate to lead a team because of our aeronautical skills. And I'm saying this because this is true. I'm not saying this just to blow my own trumpet. So it's not that I want to just be nice, but I think that if the states want to cooperate to share the development costs, and if we find the right ways of cooperating, and we allow technique to do the leadership, to stick to the budget and to have rigorous budgetary terms, and if we make the right choices, then we can have successful cooperations because major cooperation programs, there were some, the Alpha Jet, for example, was a Franco-German cooperation. So this is possible. You see, I am probably very naive in my optimism, but there is a certain reality too. So what we will need to test in the Franco-German or the Franco-British or with 2 or 3 or 4 partners in the future, if the political will is to have this cooperation, we would be ready to do that so long as the rules, and it's in the best interest of the states, not just our interest. The interest of the states is to have the best product, to carry out all the operations, the best product for our armies with the optimal cost, the optimal budget. and not to have any budget drifts, as we can see in certain programs, and exports, because the series for the European, French programs are not sufficient compared to what the Americans do, and we need exports. And the export rules that will be settled between the countries cooperating, they will have to be specified. And I think it's in the best interest of France to preserve its export capacity. This is true for the aircraft, for the submarines, for ships, for tanks, for any sector. So therefore, it will be a topic for discussion, certainly between France and Germany. Well, I don't want to create any controversy, but I'm sorry, the speaker does not have a microphone, and the interpreters cannot hear the speaker without the microphone. Well, the Breguet Dornier, the Breguet was finally a Franco-German aircraft at the end of it all. And Dornier did the drawings. Charles has a very long experience, and he can say that. So, you see, we could do this, but we were just two, and we had a certain capacity for the drawings. The Neuron, we were 6 around the table, but it was very well organized, and it works. When you see a Neuron flying, it is very impressive. We fly it during our air shows. This shows the reliability and safety during flight. Otherwise, the prefects would not allow us to fly over crowds. So we've managed to do this, and we've organized all this. And France, with the DG at the time, would steer with the others. And that's this challenge. What will be our common needs? We have to find a prime contractor, well determined. Each country cannot do just anything. And an industrial architect, as I call it, who will be able to organize the work share, the maneuvers, and make sure that the budget is the proper budget. But when you haven't planned for anything, when you haven't done anything, you cannot just say overnight, I'm going to do everything. We have to look at the risk. A demonstrator is a real risk examination. There were prototypes, and there will always be prototypes, and the way in which we'll cooperate, that's going to be the most important point. Okay, well, I think that we will close our press conference on the results. Thank you for coming, and hope to see you again very soon. Have a nice day.